Dorothy Counts-Scoggins, Dot, as she is commonly known, has dedicated her life working to enrich the lives of others and organizations in which to ultimately create a more just and caring world. After her experience with the desegregation of schools in Charlotte, North Carolina, she chose a life to ensure that all children would receive a quality education, regardless of their race, religion, and culture. In addition, to be free from injustice and to learn to live in a diverse world and be accepting of others. In 1957, Dot took the walk to Harding High School as one of the 4 African-American students attempting to integrate the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system. After a week of harassment and abuse and non-acceptance by her peers, teachers, and administration, yes, I said administration, her parents withdrew her and she furthered her education in Yeadon, Pennsylvania, and Asheville, North Carolina. This path has led her to working as a social worker for abused and neglected children, preschool teacher, community college instructor, administrator in various capacities in preschool and early childhood education services, where she was able to work toward quality education for young children. 50 years later, in September of 2007, Dot was honored by being awarded an honorary diploma from Harding High School. And during that event, a documentary, 9457, produced by television reporter and award-winning filmmaker Steve Crump, was aired to family and friends, citizens, students, and public officials, captured Dot's 4 days at Harding High School. Harding School leadership team made a request to the Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education to rename the Media Center of Harding High School to be named the Dorothy Counts-Scoggins Media Center, an honor rarely bestowed upon living persons. Dot has received many other awards, being a voice and recognizing her efforts in advocating for children, education, and social justice. In June 2007, Dot was invited to the governor's mansion along with 8 other pioneers from across the state who was involved in school integration. They were awarded the Old North State Award from Governor Easley. The Old North State Award honors outstanding North Carolinians for exemplary service and commitment to the state. A proclamation was issued that the recipient be commended for childhood courage in the face of taunts and threats. Dot retired in July of 2012 as Vice President of Quality Improvement and Business Consultation at Child Care Resources, Inc. after 24 years of service, and now has started her own early childhood consulting service to assist in the development and management of quality early childhood programs for children. Dot is a graduate of Johnson C. Smith University and received certification in early childhood leadership at UNC Chapel Hill. Dot has traveled across the country to tell her story of changing the education system in America in 1957. And her speaking engagements have been geared to our younger generation to ensure that the history is heard and not forgotten. Also, Dot continues to serve as a volunteer mentor in many of the low-performing schools in the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system to ensure that each child has an opportunity for success. She also has worked with several organizations, elected officials, and advocates across the system promoting the importance of diversity for our children. Dot is also very interested in preserving and restoring the communities in the Northwest Corridor, a community in which she grew up in. The Northwest Corridor is a historic district in Charlotte and has its anchor, Johnson C. Smith University, which is over 150 years old. The community is comprised primarily of African-American families and now going through gentrification. It is very important that the community become diversified as the city has now become more global, but more importantly, not lose its history. Therefore, she serves on the board of Charlotte Area Fund, Historic West End Neighborhood Association, and the Northwest Council of Elders. Dot is also a member of Memorial Presbyterian Church and Delta Sigma Theta. So, last week, I had the opportunity to hear you speak, Ms. Dot, about your experience changing history as a Black person in the United States of America. However, it was still a period in history when women were seen and not heard. It's interesting that you were born in the quote unquote silent generation, but we all know that there's nothing silent about you. And all that said, to set the stage for the question that I really want to ask to kick off this discussion, to transition to the testimony I'd like for our audience to hear. And I can't imagine what it was like to have experienced what you did when you took what seemed like an extremely long walk down a short path to the front door of the school once you got outside of the car on September 4th, 1957. And I've heard your story several times in person. By you starting with the opportunity, I had to interview you 2 years ago, not at a Black History conference, but at a women's conference. And this past Sunday, I heard you speak from the perspective of a Black person in an era when both the Black voice and the female voices were silent. However, when you took that walk, you spoke very loudly with your thoughts and your wisdom and your decision and your actions. An action to take a stand and to walk, really. An action to adapt and to adjust, to retract with the strategy of pretty much rerouting your journey. It was about being Black, and we all know that. But today, the inspiration is about being a woman. So can you speak to us about the importance of the motherline in knowing one's identity, the importance of education, changing the world with wisdom, just as the scriptures that we read earlier instructed us, and the operative word is wisdom, because every time I hear you speak, nothing but wisdom leaks and flows. So what is the importance, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that you can come up. Bear with me, I would have to change the view to speaker view. What is the importance of the mother line in your story?
Well, Aisha, I grew up, of course, in the era of segregation, but at the same time, I was very fortunate to have women in my life that, such as my father's mother, my grandmother, but also my mother, and we always had what I call extended family in our communities. And so they were the ones who gave me the wisdom that I needed. Not only the wisdom that I needed, but also I grew up with a very, very strong faith. So if you know that my father was a Presbyterian minister, so I grew up in the Presbyterian church as a child and still in that same church today. But I was fortunate. My grandmother was not an educated person per se when we think in terms of education, but she had so much wisdom to share with all of us, not only with me, but with my 3 siblings, my brothers. And one of the things that I saw with my grandmother is that just because she and my grandfather did not have that, but they wanted to ensure that their children had the education that they needed to have. So as a young child, I saw that impressed upon my father's siblings, but also I heard that from her. And not only that, I heard that from my dad. I lived on the college campus at Johnson C. Smith University, where my father was also a professor there. So that was another part of it too, as well. And that also for me was the part that I needed to see when we talk about education. So that, as you talked about that first step, that came as a result of 3 years after Brown. Nothing had been done around desegregation in Charlotte. And so there were a group led by the late Kelly Alexander of activists in this town that said, let's just test the system. And my dad was a part of that. There were 20 families that had applied. And of course, there were 5 families that accepted, but only 4 families chose to take that step. And of course, our family was one of them. It was a decision that was made not only by my parents, but by all of us. I came from a family where any decisions that were made as a family were made by the whole family. Back in those days, our discussions were across the dinner table. I tell people that I was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was mandated that we all be together for dinner. When my father came across the street from his office, we sat down and we had dinner together. But not only that, after we had prayer, and the first thing he would say, "How was your day?" And sometimes I think that those are pieces that are missing today, because those are the conversations that you have with your children. So we were all able to share with my parents in terms of what our day was like. So that's when the discussion started for me in terms of the entire family about the decisions that had been made. My dad always said that my going to Harding was morally right. I had the right. I was an American citizen. We were taxpayers, and I deserved to have the same education as everybody else. That day for me changed my life. I did not anticipate the harassment and abuse that I received as I took that 2-block walk to the school. And but one of the things when I got out of the car, in the picture that you saw, that was one of my father's colleagues. And he came that morning, and it shows you how families come together. But he came that morning and he said to my dad, "Is there anything I can do?" And he said, "Maybe you should ride with us, because I don't know what is going to happen once we get there." And of course, when we got there, the street was barricaded, so he could not get me down to the school. But what he said to me before I got out of the car was that you are you're not inferior to anyone. Hold your head up high. Be proud of who you are, and you can do anything that you want to do. So that's what I carried with me as I proceeded to walk the 2 blocks to the auditorium. So all of the things, the name calling and all of the things that was said to me during that period, I knew that I had not only my family, I had God with me in terms of making that step. And I say that was the first step of my journey in terms of trying to change the education system of America. Yes, I was there 4 days, and the harassment that I received on the outside continued on the inside. One of the things that when I was walking toward the auditorium, there was a female in the crowd of the students, an adult, and she told the girls, "Spit on her and don't let her get to that door." So you can imagine, by the time that I got to the door, the spit was dripping from my dress. That was her dress. My grandmother also was a seamstress. And that was the dress that my grandmother made for me to wear the first day of school, which she had done since I was in first grade. And so I went inside, sat down. No one said anything. And the same kinds of things on the outside continued on the inside. The principal was standing on the stage. He never said anything. They were adults. They were lined along in the auditorium. No one said anything to me at all. Then we were dismissed to go to our homeroom classes. And even when I went in the homeroom class to get my schedule and pick up my books, there were two teachers in the classroom. They also ignored me. So the 3 days that I was, the 4 days that I was there, the non-acceptance and ignoring me continued during that period of time. The last day, and each day I came home, my parents would say to me, "What do you think? Do you want to go back?" And I said, "Absolutely." And my last day there, the day before that, I was sitting in the cafeteria and a group of boys spat in my food. I picked up the tray, put it on the conveyor belt, and I walked out and sat outside. So when I went home that day, I told my parents what had happened. And I said, I can endure anything. But one of the things is I can't stay at school all day and not eat. So can I come home for lunch? And they planned to pick me up that fourth day. And as I proceeded to get ready to go outside, a black water racer hit me in my back and a sharp object hit me in the back of my head. And of course, each time something happened to me in the school, I always turned around. It was always a group. But one of the things that was most disappointing to me was the principal saw everything that happened to me, and he ignored it. So when I walked outside, I saw my father's car, and my brother was sitting inside, and the back window was shattered. And that's the first time that I was afraid. So when I went home and shared that information with my parents, my dad called the police department, called the superintendent of schools. The superintendent said that he had not been informed that anything was going on at Harding, and the police chief said, "We cannot guarantee her safety." And that's when my father made the decision that now enough is enough, because he said I needed to be protected. So I withdrew from Harding. And as he said, I went to Yaden, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. It was a public school. And then I was there for a year to finish out the year. And my last 2 years was in a private girls' boarding school in Asheville, North Carolina. So I tell you that story because for me, what that experience did for me, it made me the person that I am today, and the choices that I chose. And one of the things is I said at 15, what happened to me then would never happen to another child. So all the work that I have done in the last 68 years has been to ensure that children have a quality education. They are also heard. And so today, at 82, I am still doing that.
Amen. Amen. And we know that you're turning 83 this month in just a few weeks. But, every time you tell this story, and I've had the opportunity to hear you speak live on several occasions, and every single time you talk about your dress dripping with saliva, I just get chills. I get chills because I couldn't imagine what you felt in that situation. But just to recap everything you just shared, you spoke about improvement, right? Every generation is supposed to get better. And you spoke about your grandparents wanting the best for you and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, because they didn't have certain things in life. And we see that happening even today with how you invest in the young people in your mentorship program, right? You spoke about traditions. And I saw that Anisha Jackson wrote in the chat, she agrees that we should bring back family dinners. That's something very, very, very important. And I too do that with my kids, you know, every evening. Even if it's just to be together for 15, 20 minutes, it's important because we get to recap our days, right? So those of you on this line, and those of you who will have the opportunity to see this video, that's something that, you know, we encourage you to do with your own families. You also spoke about identity, knowing who you are, right? And the confidence, knowing that you had the right to attend school, although it was just 4 days, you still made a bold statement. And so we just want to thank you for sharing your story. One thing I would love for you to speak about, Ms. Dot, is forgiveness and reconciliation. And I know that that's something that every human being has to deal with, right? We all have situations in our lives where, whether it's loved ones that we may disagree with or be separated from for whatever reason, or, you know, at work, we might have disagreements, in the community, at church, whatever it is. But I heard you tell this story before, and I would love for you to share it with everyone who's on this call. Can you just talk about your forgiveness of the young man and what happened thereafter that people may not know about?
Okay, 50 years later, they had, I received an email from our local newspaper, and what had happened, we had a celebration at Harding, not the current Harding, but the old Harding at the school. And the observer got in touch with me and said they had received a request from a student that was with me at Harding. And they wanted to be able to get in touch with me and wanted to know if they could share my information. And I told them, yes, share my email address only. And I got this email the next day from a young man. He was a senior. Of course, I was a sophomore going to Harding, but he was a senior. And he was in that crowd that day. And he asked for forgiveness, because he said, you know, I was in the crowd. I wasn't the one that was causing harm to you, but I wish now that I had done something to help you during that time. Well, I had to think about it, and I had to sleep on it. And the next day, I returned an email to him, and I said, I forgave you 50 years ago. It was just not my time. But what we can do is we can be an example to others, especially to young people, in terms of what happened then and now that you and I have come together. And hopefully, like us traveling around the city and going to different places, that hope this will not happen to your children, grandchildren, my children, and my grandchildren. So we did get together. We traveled to different schools in Charlotte. We went to churches, and we spoke about forgiveness. Woody developed cancer, and at the time, in Freedom Park here in Charlotte, there is a bench that's called the Forgiving Bench. And they asked Woody and I if we could come and dedicate that bench together. He had cancer. He wasn't able to come. His family came, and the bench was dedicated by Woody and I. His wife called me and told me that he was in hospice, and she wanted me to know that. And I left work that day, and I drove to Huntersville to the hospice hospital. And when I went in the room, the nurse said to me, his family was there, and his nurse said to me, he can hear you. He probably will not respond. His eyes were closed. And I sat there by the bed and talked to him for 2 hours. And when I left and went home, 2 hours, his wife called me the next morning, and she said, Dot, I just want to let you know that Woody died 2 hours after you left. He was waiting on you. They invited me to participate in his services as a part of their family. And so I've had that memory in terms of my forgiving him, but also our hope is that the blessings that those that we talk to would have received the same kind of thing. Just because something happened, it does not mean that you hold it for the rest of your life. And so that's another part of my story that I think is so very, very important. That things can happen to people, but at the same time, forgiveness is even more important.
That is so powerful. And I distinctly remember when you spoke about that during the first time that I met you when I interviewed you. And I believe it was someone in the audience that had asked that question and you were able to speak to it. And I was so grateful that she asked that if you had ever connected with anyone from Harding back at that time. Oh gosh, I have so many questions to ask you, but we are pressed for time. What advice do you have for the generation of women after you, those that are here and those to come, knowing that they too will have their unique characteristics and experiences, advice concerning family, faith, friendship, finances, function, anything that you, if there's one thing that you can share with women right now, what would it be?
Well, I have always said that, it's very important that they use their voice. I'm not even for this age, but I have said that to younger children as well. My field was early childhood, so and I worked in that field for 40 years, so I'm talking about from birth to 12 years of age. But what I would say is use your voice. Use it to make and advocate not only for yourself, but advocate for others, which is also very, very important, especially in this day and time. The other piece is get involved and do something if it's not only for one person, if it's not a group, but if it's one person. What can you do? As my father used to say, how can you give back? And so what can you do to give back and to someone else? And in doing that, that's a part of your faith, that's a part of your leadership, that's a part of who you are as a young woman.
Amen. I love that. Using your voice and giving back, even if it is just one person. And again, that is what I believe is a spirit that kind of fostered just what we're doing right now. Because like I said earlier on, so many women have been sharing with me, they want to do something, they just don't know what to do or they don't know how. So hopefully, collectively we can come together and figure out how to do just that, what you are advising the younger generation to do. To close us out, Miss Dot, if you can have one wish, just one wish, only one, right now, what would it be?
My one wish would be, Alicia, that we would have unity in this world. I tell people that I always have hope. So hope is one, and the other is unity, that we can get along in this world with each other.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. And you know that every time I'm in your presence, I just always leave so refreshed and rejuvenated and full of life and just feeling like I could change the world. So hopefully everyone here tonight feels the same way. And let's just drop some love in the chat for Miss Dorothy Counts-Scoggins. Thank you so much. We applaud you for all that you are, even before all that you've done, all that you are, because it is who you are that allows you to do what you did. And it starts with the forgiveness, and the forgiveness starts with love. And you are love, Miss Dot. I'm so grateful for our relationship. I see it living, you living that out every single day. And I'm just so grateful to be in your life, and hopefully you're grateful to be in mine. So we